channel. Thank you, Steve Palmer. Yay! Let's see, Air Force veteran, right? Is that what you are, right? Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your past service. Muchas gracias. All right, I just want to do a few little promos, and then we're going to get right to our guest, Jerry Sheridan. This Thursday, George and I will be, and we're going to do a live broadcast of the show, and that's at 20 Prize. She's going to educate us on all of the propositions, so it should be quite interesting. Also, Marissa Hamilton, who's running for the City of Phoenix mayor, is dropping by, so it's going to be a jam-packed show. Come by, be our live audience. We had a lot of fun last week, right, George? That was a great show.
That was a great show.
We had Leah Marquez Peterson was there. Gina Swoboda was there talking elections. We had Nick Vada, who was really cool. He brought in this invention someone had about taking your temperature. You just walk up and it says you have a normal temperature. Look for that show. It's on YouTube. And what else? Oh, also next week on Thursday at the Latinos for Trump Center, we are going to have on Tuesday, excuse me, not on Thursday. On Tuesday, we're going to be at the Latinos for Trump Center also because that's debate night, POTUS debate night. Will there be a debate? What do you think, Jerry? Will there be a debate?
I think so.
Okay, good. Hopefully they'll give some Adderall to the vice president. Oh, did I say that? No, I didn't say that. But Trevor Loudon will be our guest, and he's going to talk about enemies within the church. And Alice is hoping not to get excommunicated from her Catholic church. But it's going to be a really good show, and there'll be lots of food there and friends. You'll be among good Republicans and conservatives, so we invite you, and that's Tuesday, again, at the Latinos for Trump Center, and that's 2070 East Baseline. You know how I remember 2070 East Baseline? I think about 1070, but it's 2070 because we're 2020. So that's how I remind myself. George, do we have any birthdays today or anything?
My son's birthday was Saturday, and we talked to him from Texas.
Happy birthday, Georgie. Sergeant Georgie.
Georgie. Yeah.
Good. Nice.
We're still waiting to hear from the White House. So.
Yeah, it's doing good.
Yeah.
Right on.
He said maybe in a couple of months he'll know if he's going to be stationed out there in Washington.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Well,
But if not, he's going to go to drill sergeant school. So.
Nice.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so
Belated
he's
birthday.
He's a staff sergeant right now.
Belated birthday to Georgie. And any birthdays you want to announce, Jerry?
No.
Anybody? No? Good.
No.
All right.
Everybody's
Great.
back.
Excellent. Okay, so we're going to get right to our interview. A lot of you maybe are watching from other states, and as you know, we had a very famous sheriff here before, Sheriff Joe Arpaio. And in fact, Jerry worked with the sheriff for quite a long time, so he really knows his stuff. Right now, unfortunately, the last election we had, Sheriff Joe Arpaio lost to Democrat Penzone. So we're trying to replace Penzone with Jerry Sheridan, who is a solid Republican. So we're thrilled. We finally got you here. We had scheduled him a while back, and then, life is busy. What can we say?
Right.
So welcome again to the Chips and Salsa Show, Jerry. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor and a privilege to finally get here today.
Woo,
yeah,
great.
I'm very excited.
I'm going to toss it right to you so you can give your little bio to the people out there, because you can do it better than I could.
Okay. Well, everybody, I was born and raised in New York City. My dad and a couple of my uncles were New York City cops.
Wow.
At the age of 18, I graduated from Holy Cross High School in Flushing, New York, and moved to Arizona. And about 3 months later, I found myself at the age of 18 and joined the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office as a reserve deputy sheriff. And the real Reader's Digest version is 40 years later, I retired as the chief deputy. But there's a lot that happened in between, as you can imagine, in those 40 years.
I bet you got a book in there that you could write.
Oh,
one or two.
I should have taken notes like my mom told me. When the day I graduated from the Phoenix Police Academy in early part of 1979, as a full-time deputy sheriff, she told me, she said, Jerry, you need to write down these stories and take photographs along the way, and you'll have a bestseller. And of course, you don't always listen to your mom like you should, right?
Well, sure. I detected a little bit of the New York accent in there.
I do.
Which I love. I love the New York accent.
It was a great place to grow up, in a nice, diverse neighborhood. And I had a nice 12-year Catholic education. It's a very important part of who I am as a person. And then I had a great time as a reserve deputy. I rode with some of the most iconic deputies in the history of the sheriff's office that taught me how to interact with people. You know, one of the deputies was a person of color, and he really taught me how to talk to people. And then as a deputy sheriff, you know, I spent 5 years in a patrol car. I got promoted to corporal. And so my service as a supervisor, leader, started 33 years. I worked for 4 sheriffs over those 40 years of my association with the sheriff's office. And I learned some good things from each one of the sheriffs, and I also learned things that maybe you shouldn't do. And you know, like we learn from everybody around us, right? And you take, I always said that I learned from the good leaders, and I put good things in my bag of tricks. Remember Felix the cat?
I used to love Felix the cat.
Felix, and he had his bag of tricks.
Yeah, the bag of
Yep.
tricks.
You know, and so I put the good things in there and discarded the things that I didn't like about certain individuals, and that's how you become a leader. And sheriff's office afforded me a lot of opportunity to do some great things. I've had great experiences, but the biggest thing it gave me, I think, is it introduced me to my wife. And at 2 o'clock in the morning in New River, there's a guy that barricaded himself in the house, and he threatened to shoot all the deputies and his wife and kids, and they ran out the back door. And I saw this lady walking within the perimeter, so we went and grabbed her out of the line of fire, and I found out that she was the daughter of one of the deputies that worked on my shift.
Wow.
And to make a long story short, I wound up marrying that girl, and that was 32 years ago.
What a great story.
So,
Oh my
yeah.
goodness.
Father
You were supposed to do that job.
Her father was a Phoenix motorcycle cop. Her mother was a deputy sheriff. And it's, you know, my kids, my grandkids, everything I have comes from my affiliation with MCSO.
Wow.
So, you know, people often ask me, Jerry, after 38 years and you were the chief deputy the last 6 years, why are you running? And I said, well, because I owe the people that work there, the citizens of this county, and MCSO a debt of gratitude. And this is my way of paying them back.
See, what people understand is we back the blue, and we back them for a reason. Police officers are just human beings like us, and I'm associated with a lot of different officers because I do security at the Cardinal Stadium, and these people have lives, they have families, and they're true patriots in the sense of wanting to do their job of defending people, upholding the laws of the land. And I work with the state troopers. I don't work with the sheriffs, but the sheriffs are just the same. They're all men in blue, there to defend.
And women too, don't
And
forget
women.
them.
Don't forget the gals. Come on. So you should have the first question because you are the security person here, George. What do you want to ask the sheriff?
See, because there's different jurisdictions. The sheriffs do different, but they're almost the same. They have communities that they patrol. The state police usually are on the highways and stuff. I deal with Sergeant Butters every week, and he checks trucks. He checks vehicles. That's his main job now. 28 years in the state police department, and you have many years in there too. So it's like everybody's got their different things. Do you patrol a lot of the neighborhoods when you? Well, you're different. You have different.
He was higher up there by
Well,
that
you were
point.
higher
But you
up
did a
there.
lot of patrolling, though,
Yeah,
I'm sure.
I think maybe in the old days you probably did.
Well, I spent about 17 years in a patrol car at different levels. Okay. And I ended my patrol career as the chief over the patrol bureau, which covered the entire county. And the sheriff's office provides primary law enforcement service to about 400,000 people outside the city limits. Okay. But don't forget, the sheriff is a constitutional position. It's an elected official. It's the chief law enforcement officer of the county. So the sheriff really reports to 4.5 million people today in 2020. And so, as such, the sheriff has a lot of responsibility other than patrol, because your normal law enforcement agency basically just has the public safety component. 75% of the sheriff's office is the jail system. So I was the chief over the county jail system for 12 years, responsible for overseeing the design, construction of 2 jails, which we know now as Lower Buckeye Jail and 4th Avenue Jail. It was the largest construction project ever. I remember when Sheriff Joe called me, and I was the patrol chief, and he called me into his office, and he says, "Jerry," he says, "you ready for a change?" And I said, "Sure, Sheriff," because you never tell the boss no.
Right.
You never tell the boss no. And I said, "Sure." And he says, "You want to go to Gila Bend?" And he said, "Well, I live in Fountain Hills." And I'm like, "Oh, well, whatever you need me to do." And he says, "Well, I want you to run the jails for me." And he saw this look on my face. And, well, I'd been a detention officer for a short period of time, like 20 years ago. And he says, what kind of look is that? And I said, "Well, he said, don't worry about it. I like the way you do things." And so what he saw was the fear on my face, because I knew this construction project, no county had ever undertaken anything this big. Almost $1 billion of sales tax in 1998 had been voted by the taxpayers. And none of the work had been done to the plan, the construction of these 2 jails, the infrastructure, the food factory, the transportation, the training center, hiring thousands of officers. I knew that was going to fall on my shoulders.
Wow.
Well, little did I know in 2020 that would give me the background and training that nobody has.
That's true.
Nobody. To take on the job as sheriff of Maricopa County, especially when it's 75% of the sheriff's office. Municipal police chief, sergeant like Penzone was with Phoenix PD, they don't have that experience about the jails. They've probably never been in the jail before. But I've been there. I know what I'm doing with the jail system and all that.
So you know it inside and out,
grateful.
from the ground up.
From the ground
Wow.
up. And
How many years?
for the jail system, 12 years.
12
I was a
years.
chief for 12 years over the jail system.
That's a long time.
And we transitioned from the Madison Street Jail, which is now the new county attorney's office. When we vacated that, I don't know, it's probably been about 15 years ago. It sat vacant for a long time, and the Board of Supervisors turned that vacant jail into the county attorney's office, and it's beautiful. I went for a tour. One of the things that I do personally is I'm a fine art photographer. I've won some national recognition, some local awards
Oh, cool.
in my fine art photography, and I have some of my photographs of the old jail when it was vacant. My wife and I, on a Sunday afternoon, we would go down to the vacant jail and I'd photograph it. And we've got some of my photographs hanging up in the lobby at the new county attorney's office.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, we have 45 minutes, so what I want to encourage you guys, maybe George and I can monitor Facebook, so if you have any questions for Jerry Sheridan, put them on Facebook and we can filter them through that way. I think Steve might look on there as well too. I just want it to be participatory as well. There's a lot to talk about, and before we got started, before the show, of course we were talking about one of the most glaring, obvious things that there is. The world is so different now.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I turn my TV on, there's a car being burned down or somebody got assaulted, and I'm thinking, why? Why are they letting them do that? Why? That is not a peaceful protest. That is not,
Right.
So I know these are happening mostly within cities, but what kind of jurisdiction does a sheriff's office have to intervene or do something about that?
That's a great question, because the sheriff, like I mentioned a minute ago, is the constitutional law enforcement officer, the chief law enforcement officer. One of the duties and responsibilities, and it says right there in ARS 11441, is to prevent and suppress affrays and riots.
I love that.
Okay? So, the duty of the sheriff is to assist the municipal agencies with those situations. And in positions where maybe the municipal police chief doesn't have the backing of the city government, the sheriff absolutely has the authority to act to stop those.
So how does that work? It's like, do they have to call you up, or what happens?
Well, I would think if I was the sheriff, I'll tell you how I would do it. Okay, the current sheriff has been pretty silent about this. If you notice, he's been
Very silent.
yeah, very silent, and I'll just leave it at that. Okay, I'll be nice. Jerry Sheridan would be there with one of the police chiefs. You know, we had major issues, riots, I will call them, major disturbances in 3 of the big cities in Maricopa County. As a constitutional conservative Republican, I am here to protect and enforce the Constitution, and that means people have the right to peaceably, and that's what it says in the First Amendment, to peaceably assemble. But the second they throw a rock or a bottle, it's no longer peaceful, right? And so that has to be declared an unlawful assembly, whether the sheriff does that or the police chief does that or whoever's in charge of the situation. And then the issue is you need to take enforcement action. You need to give people a few minutes to disperse. If they don't disperse, you need to disperse the crowd and arrest those that don't disperse. Now, my wife, being a very smart person, not smarter than me, I could tell you that right now, she came up with the idea of how to disperse the crowd. And that's using skunk water. Now, we've seen on TV all across the country, and I've had personal experience, tear gas doesn't work that well. It gets just, dispersed in the air, it goes away, they throw the canister back at the cops, and all that. But skunk water is used by the Israelis very effectively. And all it is, it's organic, and it's yeast, sodium bicarbonate, and water. You can actually drink it. So it doesn't hurt anybody, but it
You
makes
can't get sued if you
people
use it.
sick to their stomach as soon as they smell it.
You know what, George? Do you remember, and excuse me for interrupting you, but we had Darren Birch on here, and you probably know Darren. He's a writer of books and used to be a Phoenix police officer. And he mentioned skunk water as well,
Oh,
too.
he did?
Yes, so I love that you both
Okay,
are on the same
so-
page.
And it's not like spraying somebody with a fire hose like they used to back in the 60s, because you could break somebody's arm or leg, somebody can hit their head, they could die. It's not good. You don't want to hurt people in the process. You just want to disperse the crowd. You don't want them to get to the point where they're starting to loot and burn buildings and hurt each other, hurt law enforcement and all that. You want to take care of it immediately. That's how you deal with these issues.
Why don't they
and
use
I
that?
will have my jail buses, which we have a lot of them, and I'll have them lined up for the people that don't disperse. And we will take them and arrest them. That's how you deal with this. You don't let it fester and fester and fester. And you don't show weakness in
That's what it
the
is.
face of this adversity. And they know
Sure.
they're not protected by the First Amendment anymore. They play that game. And unfortunately, some organizations have infiltrated people that have good causes, that have a voice, that need to be heard and should be heard, but they've taken over some of those issues, and they've used this to create the civil unrest, to create the uncertainty for the government, and there's many other issues too. So law enforcement's job is to stop it, and it's the sheriff's responsibility through the Arizona Constitution, and he gets the power from the people to get that done.
Has anyone asked Sheriff Penzone about maybe why he hasn't taken any action or talked about it publicly? I haven't heard anything.
I'm unaware
Have you?
of that.
Do you guys wear body cams or no? Or
Yes. The sheriff's office started issuing body cameras late part of 2014, I believe.
I also wanted to ask along the same lines of the peaceful demonstration. So if I made a threat, Sam, out there, and I start saying, I'm going to kill you or whatever, wouldn't that be enough to no longer be a peaceful demonstration if they just say something? I mean, or would they have to brandish a weapon or something?
Well, just the verbal abuse, it doesn't really go that far. People do have a right to speak their mind. Now, if it becomes a direct threat to an individual officer, it's up to that individual officer or deputy to make that decision whether or not that's a crime.
Because I mean, we've all seen the videos, and those guys. It kind of reminds me of in England when they have those guards and they just stand there and take it. And these poor officers, they take everything from these people. I don't know how they do it.
Well, back in the mid '80s, there was a county attorney ruling that the peace of a law enforcement officer could not be disturbed, because early on when I started, people would go, if you, back in the late '70s when I was a deputy in a patrol car, giving you the bird and all that stuff, people used to go to jail for that. And then, early to mid '80s, they decided that law enforcement officers' peace cannot be disturbed, and so we no longer arrested people for doing that.
So not worth it to do. They'd really have to get pretty aggressive.
They have to get pretty aggressive and pretty direct with a threat. It has to meet the Arizona Revised Statute of threatening and intimidating.
I guess I just see that, and I'm always thinking, they are disturbing the peace. Like I think I saw a protest outside, was it McConnell's house or somebody, and Lindsey Graham's house too? And these guys are getting really loud. I was like, you're in a neighborhood. You're disturbing the peace. It's one thing if you're out there with signs or softly saying things. But when you're shouting and yelling, there are other people involved. You're disturbing their peace. I mean, get them the heck out of there is what I think.
Well, if you have somebody that's willing to make a complaint, again, it has to be evaluated by the peace officers that are there.
So they have a lot of judgment. So so this maybe sounds like a dumb question, but let's say that I'm in my neighborhood and something like that starts happening. I call the police, and in Phoenix, our police will respond. I'm pretty confident of that. But maybe they didn't. Could I call the sheriff's office if I lived in the police?
You could.
In the city?
But there's a problem with calling MCSO right now is they're very, very short-handed. Employees ask me to run. My dad's 89 years old, and last year, when I made the final decision that I'm going to run, he's looking at me and says, "Are you crazy? After all these years, you earned your retirement. After 38 years, what do you want to get back in the fray for?" And I looked at him, I said, "Dad, you know why?" He said, "Because the people, the rank and file, these people are heroes to me. They're my family." I said, "They've asked me to run. Many, since Penzone took office, have quit. Hundreds of people have quit. And especially in patrol force, very severely understaffed. So much so that the town of Queen Creek, which we contract with, fired the sheriff's office earlier this year.
They did?
And decided to create their own police department. And in their study to look at their law enforcement options, they specifically stated the lack of service. It changed in 2018. So it was pretty indicative to me that Penzone is not doing the job that he professes that he's doing.
And I know he always talks about, I don't have the posse anymore, and I got rid of the tents, which I think both of those are great ideas too.
Well, the posse was 1,400 plus people strong when I left in December 2016. And he summarily dismissed that issue and got rid of almost all of them. They're less than 200 now. And he's pretty much tied their hands in what they are allowed to do compared to what they were allowed to do before I left. So they're really not even effective as force multipliers anymore, because what they used to read somebody, the posse member would take that prisoner and take them down and arrest and book them downtown here at the 4th Avenue jail, which would take hours. So that deputy didn't have to leave his or her beat.
Gosh, that makes wonderful sense.
Right? And so that's why I called them force multipliers. They're not there to do that anymore. They're not out there at the lakes and rivers on the weekends. In the summer, they had a medical support posse. Some of these were paramedics, and they would save lives every weekend. They're not allowed to do that. They're not out there anymore. We had posse members with 30 years on. A colonel from the Air Force retired. He was in all kinds of things. He got rid of him. Matter of fact, he was all over the media. The colonel was. He was so angry with Penzone, and I have a lot of posse members helping me in the campaign because I will bring the posse back to its full strength, because it's necessary for the safety and security of our deputy sheriffs out there doing a tough job to begin with, shorthanded, and number two, to the citizens of this county.
Well, and we just keep growing. I mean, like you said, we're going to be hit. That's a lot of people.
It will be the third largest county pretty quick here.
And it probably will be even higher with everything that's happening in California.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we get a lot of people, and Arizona's going to seem great.
As long as they don't bring their California politics with it and
yes.
raise our taxes and create all those restrictions for business and all that.
Did they say sometime that they weren't going to pay unemployment for 2 weeks or something?
Oh, yeah. So my friend...
So, I mean, they got laws that over there that we don't want over here.
Right.
I mean, the problems that they have over there, we don't want over here.
You know, I want to give a shout out. So last Thursday we were doing our show, George. Remember, there was an audience member, and he had a question for Gina Swoboda, who's talking about elections. And we're like, oh, Republicans from California, thank you. You know, we're all excited. Thank you. Only those guys can come, or conservatives, come on.
There's a lot from Oregon and Washington. When I was collecting signatures, I collected it at President Trump rally down at the Coliseum. Remember?
Smart, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So I was down there collecting signatures and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we haven't registered to vote yet. We just from Oregon." And there was probably more people from Oregon and Washington than California in that line.
Oh, that's
It was great
oh.
to see people, and they were Republicans, so they were bringing their politics with them.
That's hopeful. It gives us hope, at least.
It did.
Wow, you know, you don't get this information because I get stuff, you know, I get everybody's political email. And Penzone, I'll give it to him. I think every day they send one or two out. Now that I'm announcing that we're going to probably get off his list, whatever. But you never hear all of that good information. As far as anybody else knows, everything's just going along perfect and wonderful. But that's really not the case, is it?
No, it's not. That was part of his plan when he took over as sheriff, to not create any controversy. He didn't want to do anything. Well, the problem with that is, in long job, something's going to happen, right? I mean,
True.
you know, a good example is we had a very effective drug interdiction unit that worked out in the desert fighting with the drug, stopping the heroin and methamphetamine coming into Maricopa County. And he disbanded that shortly after he took office.
Again, why?
I don't know. I don't know.
And does he ever give a reason?
They were very well trained. They were very effective, very efficient.
And he didn't replace them with anybody that could do that job either. That's a lot of talent that he said goodbye to.
And doesn't the sheriff have contracts with other states where if you needed more help, other states' sheriffs automatically they send people to assist you for?
We have IGAs, intergovernmental agreements, with other counties in Arizona, but not necessarily with other states. However, back when Hurricane, could remember what year that was, 2008 or six,
years fly.
Years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been a long time. We sent 100 deputies and posse members to New Orleans. So,
And you had them. You had that big support.
And we sent them before the federal government even asked for them. They were the first ones to arrive at the city. And
I think it was Paul Babu that it said that they had some kind of interstate contract that if they needed to augment the force here in Arizona because of the border, they can actually get help from other states' sheriff's departments.
Right.
And I don't know, I had never heard of anything like that, but I was like, damn, that's pretty good. Did they have contracts like that?
Well, what a great service. You have those people that are trained already, and you can outsource them. And I just, it breaks my heart.
It's all gone now.
It breaks my heart.
It's all gone. The sheriff's office can barely take care of its own patrol needs. And like I said, Queen Creek's fired them. I know one or two of the other contract towns are looking at starting their own or contracting with other law enforcement agencies, and that's sad because when I was the chief over the patrol bureau, I made sure that those contracts were very important to MCSO and the sheriff and the communities that we served. It was very important to me. And I wanted to mention also, when I was the chief over the patrol bureau, I was responsible for security at the Bank One ballpark, and so when the Yankees came to play the Diamondbacks in the World Series, it was the first major event after September 11th. And I got to meet Rudy Giuliani. It's my favorite picture of my entire career. When they were here playing game 3, I think it was, when I had my picture taken with Rudy. And it was quite an honor. Not only that, but to be there when the Diamondbacks won the World Series was pretty awesome.
How very cool.
But it was also something that I very rarely talk about, but it was quite an accomplishment for the first major event after September 11th and all the security issues that we had to deal with.
Yeah,
I had well over 100 deputies working inside the ballpark alone. We worked with the FBI, we worked with the military, we worked with Phoenix PD, obviously, that had the enormous issue of dealing with security outside the ballpark and the traffic issues at the World Series, you can imagine.
Now, do you have a relationship with Chief Jerry Williams?
Jerry Williams, I met her a few times before I left. I was on my way out in 2016 when she was just the new chief. So I just met her a few times. But a lot of the people that work for her, I do have a relationship with. I did go to the Phoenix Police Academy, but that was a long time ago. That was, I graduated in 1979. That was just a few years ago. So, but the Phoenix Police Union, PLE, did endorse me last week.
Very nice, very nice.
And that was huge. You can see my goosebumps right now, how important that is to me.
It's very important, yes.
That the rank and file officers that are out there on the line every day risking their lives have the confidence in me that I'm the right person for the job. As well as the Arizona Police Association, which is a group of all the unions, well, not all, most all of the unions in the state, 12,000 officers strong, also endorsed my candidacy for sheriff.
That's a big deal.
And that was the 2 endorsements that's important to me running for sheriff.
I want to talk also about Tent City, because he got rid of Tent City as well.
He did.
And I always remember when we would talk to the sheriff would tell us that a lot of people that were there wanted to be in the tent city because they got to be outside. It was actually, they actually would request they like to be out there.
That is very true. As a matter of fact, when Paul took over as sheriff, he put together a blue ribbon committee that was led by Grant Woods, and he did this study, and they even that group found that the inmates, and they specifically interviewed the Hispanic inmates, they wanted to stay in Tent City. They liked being housed. It's part of their report. And plus, not only did the inmates rather be outside than locked up in a hard facility where you don't get to see the sunlight and all that, but it was also an issue of the housing philosophy and the options that you have as an administrator over the jail system to be able to move inmates. And they were all convicted of crimes. They weren't pre-sentenced inmates, which is 80% of the jail population is pre-sentenced. They haven't been convicted of a crime.
It's not like they've just been booked and you're waiting.
Right. So you just couldn't put anybody in tents. Okay. And it wasn't that bad because the inmates worked. They worked in the kitchen. They worked in the laundry. They ate better than the rest of the inmates because they worked in the kitchen. They had work release, work furlough inmates, so some of them could go to work, and they just slept in the tents. So they had open access to the day room all the time. Now Sheriff Joe made it sound like it was a concentration camp. Okay, that was his philosophy and his way to get notoriety. Okay, but in reality,
115 degrees in summer. We'll give him.
Well, let's face it. It's hot when you're sleeping at night. If you're like my wife, if it's not 72 degrees or something, she doesn't like it.
Sorry, Miss
So it would
Sheridan.
be hot at night.
And they had animals that because he was an animal advocate.
Oh, that's
and
right.
They had horses, they had cows, they had everything there, and the inmates were taking care of them. So it was like you're not really in jail. You're like taking care of
I
animals.
thought that was such good therapy too.
Yeah.
And, and I'm a big animal lover as well.
You know,
And,
Does he still have that program in
Me
place?
too. Well, there. If you go down
I
right
have to
now,
ask.
after I say this, you watch. They're going to go down with a weed eater. But there hasn't been a horse or a goat or a livestock in the MASH 2 in probably 2.5 years. The MASH in the central jail, the main jail, is still there, but not until I brought it to the attention of Paul on Facebook last year. It was not a priority with him. He disbanded the animal cruelty detective unit, which we had 4 detectives and a civilian employee specifically trained in investigating animal cruelty cases. Now, I have rescue dogs. I have rescue horses. I have horses and dogs. And I live in 5 acres in a rural
say you
area.
must live.
So I live with these animals every day. They're part of my family. So I will bring back the animal cruelty unit and make MASH a priority again. And because it's in my heart, it's in what I believe in, not because it's politically correct. And I think Paul is doing it because it's politically correct, and it wasn't a priority until I really hit him. He's done count them, one animal cruelty case since he has been the sheriff. And it was a detective, I feel sorry for this detective, that didn't have the training to do an animal cruelty cases, because the elements of the crime are a lot different in proving whether an animal was abused or neglected than in the normal training of a detective. So they need specific training and equipment.
And I always think that, anybody who would be cruel to an animal and do that, there's like a forewarning there of that person, what they might be capable of. That's why I also think it's really important to have.
People historically, if you're an animal abuser, you're very likely to abuse your fellow human beings also. And so one of the elements is to train the deputies to make sure when you get called to an animal cruelty case, just the patrol deputies, the initial response is to look around, make sure this person's children are not abused, make sure the spouse is not abused, and to take a good look around the entire scene while you're there to make sure that other things aren't going on.
Wow. Oh, there's so much information that we're getting that we didn't really know. Did you know all this stuff, George?
I knew the animals, that they have the animals there, and I know that they had a strict program.
But that it wasn't there anymore.
But
My goodness.
Yeah, but it's empty, because I've been by the courthouse over there, and it doesn't look nothing like it did before. Because when there were times I go, you see cows and horses.
Right.
It looked like a
big farm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to take a podcast today and not taking commercial breaks. And thanks again to Jim Bunner, who's taking care of us today. Appreciate it. But I want to remind you, I'm Alice Lara with Don Jorge. And we are interviewing Jerry Sheridan. And Jerry is running for sheriff of Maricopa County. And we're getting ready to vote here really, really soon. And now I know you're out there as much as you can with this China virus thing. It's a challenge to do all that. Do you have any upcoming events to tell our audience about where they might be able to meet you?
I have so many events, I don't know where to start.
Or where should they go to find out about it?
I've got a big fundraiser tomorrow. I have a forum with Sergeant Paul.
Oh, you do?
Yes, on Thursday.
Ooh.
And that's in Ahwatukee, and it'll be on Zoom.
Oh, okay.
What time is that? Do you know?
So that's at 6:00, I believe. On Thursday, and they're only, like you said, with all this, they're only allowing 30 people in the room, and so they're opening it up to Zoom. That's the Ahwatukee Chamber. We're also going to do a debate on Horizon. We're taping it. I don't know if they're going to do it live. I don't think they do it live. I don't know, but it's going to be October 9th. It's a Friday.
Yeah, I've been on Horizon twice, and they have a studio and everything there.
Yeah.
And then they.
But that's going to be a half hour.
Yeah, those are short.
Yeah.
Well, I'm surprised he decided to debate you. That's
Yeah.
good. I'm glad. I look forward to that.
Well, he's good at something. He's very
probably
good.
is pretty good at that.
He's very good. He's articulate, more so than me. He is very well polished in front of the camera, which I am not. So he probably feels empowered to do that. The problem is, I spent 40 years of my life at the sheriff's office, starting as a volunteer and retiring as the chief deputy. So if he thinks he's going to run circles around me about the issues, he's mistaken. But he looks good on camera. He speaks well, and that does play to the audience. So maybe that's what he's thinking. I don't.
Who's going to moderate that? Is that going to be a?
I'm not sure on Thursday. I'm not sure.
And Horizon is the same Spanish moderator that does all the.
Yeah, I don't know
shows.
who's going to.
And he's good. I mean,
You're
they're
talking
good.
about Horizonte, maybe. I don't know.
Horizonte.
There's another
Oh,
one,
there was
Horizon.
There's
There's
a different
Horizon
one.
and a Horizonte.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But I'm just happy because then that will probably be played again, or we'll be able to watch that again
Right.
in case you miss it. So, I really think that those debates, those things are really important to watch because you're both right there, and hopefully it's in true debate fashion because that way, if he says something and you say, "Well, wait a minute, I need to correct that,"
Right.
and rebut, you can.
Well, we did one on Zoom on KTAR, which is over the radio, which you can't see people's facial expressions. It's hard. You only have a minute, and you can't respond. And it's radio, so it was quick, and that was difficult. I held my own against them.
It's not the same when you're not there in person.
Right,
It really
exactly.
isn't.
So I'm looking forward to Thursday in person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. I think it'd be very, very interesting to do that. So you're out and you're talking to people, and one thing I know that about him, even when before the election, we had 3 people running for sheriff, but he was still running against Sheriff Joe and knocking all that down, and he's still doing that.
I think he still is. If you look at his campaign signs, it says leadership over showmanship.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, he certainly couldn't be talking about me because people don't, outside the law enforcement community, they don't really know who Jerry Sheridan is, or they didn't until I started my campaign and got my signs up, which people are stealing them and taking them down. It's terrible business, this politics, right?
Man.
And so, but now people are knowing me. We've gone to a couple events, just recently, and my wife said on the way home, she was like, "Oh, Jerry," said, "your signs are working. Everybody's coming up to you, and they said, they're noticing who you are, and they know your name." And I said, "Well, that's what all this is about, right? That name recognition, that name ID." And so I brought that up on the KTAR interview, the forum we called it, and about the showmanship over leadership, that kind of thing. It's like, so yeah, I think he would much rather be running against Sheriff Joe because he beat him pretty
I
handily.
think he was like, that's what he was preparing for.
Yeah, I do
You know,
too.
he really thought that that's what's going to happen. So I think you kind of throw him off game a little bit, maybe.
I do too, and the vast majority of the MCSO employees are supporting me, and I know that because they contact me constantly. I got a week and a half ago, I got a text message from a deputy sheriff. He said he was sitting in his driveway and he was just numb because he just submitted his resignation.
Oh my
And
goodness.
he didn't have enough time to retire, and he was just leaving the sheriff's office. He
it
was
was
going to go
that
work
bad?
somewhere else. And it was so bad. I'll tell you this story. There was a lieutenant that had 18 years on, and he quit in 2018 to go to a small law enforcement agency in northern Arizona as a line officer, as a police officer. It's not easy to get promoted. So he got promoted to sergeant, lieutenant. He's a second generation deputy sheriff. I went to the police academy with his father. That tells you,
Wow.
And he grew up in the passenger seat of that patrol car with his dad. And he was a second generation deputy sheriff, a lieutenant, and he quit because it was so bad working for Penzone.
Boy, that says
And
a lot.
hundreds of people have done the same thing. and this isn't because of the latest animosity towards law enforcement. This happened early on in Penzone's career. There's over 1,800 active internal investigations. People ask me, well, why? Because he doesn't have the confidence. This is my opinion. I have a master's degree in organizational management. I've been to a lot of school, college. I taught college for 22 years in the administration of justice at the college level. My theory is he doesn't have the confidence in himself to be the leader of the fourth largest sheriff's office in the nation. So subsequently, he doesn't have the confidence in his people. And so everything goes to an internal investigation. And he has the power over some of that as the sheriff to stop that nonsense. And he has not done so. He's letting other entities run the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. Jerry Sheridan will not do that.
Wow. So when you say other entities, could
Yeah.
they be political in nature, maybe?
Well, you know, the sheriff's office is under a court order. Okay, Melendrez court order. You know, it's a very infamous issue, you know, that we had to deal with. And so there is a group of paragraphs that the sheriff's office has to comply with. But what has happened is the ACLU predominantly has been allowed to add to the court order, and that's what makes the lives miserable for the deputies and the detention officers, and I think that is absurd.
So let's get you elected. You go in there. First thing you're going to do is?
Very first thing, at the stroke of midnight on New Year's Eve, I'm going to get in that patrol car in my uniform, and I'm going 10-8, which means in service. And Stacy wants to come with me. And I'm going to go around to the deputies in the substations, and I'm going to tell them, just go do your job. I want you to go do your job, because they're afraid to right now. They're afraid of the administration. And that's what I'm trying to get at. And then I'm in the process as driving around. It's a big county, 9,226 square miles. I'm going to stop by the jails, and I'm going to tell the officers there, don't be afraid, do your job.
I love that plan.
And I'm going to make my last stop will be at communications. The heartbeat of any law enforcement agency is the radio communication center, where people call in 911 and they dispatch the deputies, the dispatchers, and I'm going to tell them the same thing because they suffer from the same problems. And then I'm going to do some more stuff, and I'm not telling you because if I do right now, Paul will steal my ideas like he's stolen every other idea. Every time I make a comment, kind of like with the animal cruelty thing, well, that got cleaned up right away, and then a week and a half later, he comes up with a $2 million check from a person to start a new MASH unit, which hasn't happened. And I mentioned creating a better dialogue with the court over the court order and what needs to happen, and then he tries to do that about 2 weeks later. And then I make this comment, and he tries to fix this, and so I'm done. I'm done giving him hints on how to be a sheriff.
I think that's smart.
Okay.
I think that's smart.
So we'll save those issues for the debate.
So in these things, since I know you were on KTR and different things, have you had a chance to, or as a journalist, surprise, surprise, asked him about why are people leaving? Has anyone asked him that question? I don't think
anybody has. The media has pretty much let him get away with anything that he says. So we'll see if that changes. I'm not hopeful that that's going to change in the next, well, let's face it, the early ballots go out October 7th. They'll be on people's kitchen tables on October 8th. Yep. Most people will fill them out and send them in. So this election's over in the next 3-4 weeks.
Really?
Right?
This is
the official election date of November 3rd is 44 days away. This is going to be over before you know it. So,
boom.
Have you been to the communities, the Hispanic communities, knocking on doors?
I have been to a lot of the Trump victory places. I haven't been to the new one. They just opened that a couple weeks ago, the Latinos for Trump.
Well, the Latinos for Trump has been open for a little bit longer than that,
Oh,
but you need to
on
come visit
Baseline?
us on
Okay.
Baseline. Mhm.
I had a nice fundraiser in South Phoenix neighborhood last week.
Okay.
We had a taco truck and a lot of people came. Matter of fact, a reporter from the Arizona Republic came. So I do have a lot of support in the Hispanic community, and I do have a lot of support with the Hispanic employees. And all you'd have to do is just go to my Facebook page and see what the employees say about me. And it's actually put a lot of pressure on me personally because a lot of people see me as their only hope.
You know, mentioning the Latinos, I remember when Sheriff Joe was in there, and a lot of people, oh, Sheriff Joe is just a racist and all this. There were always, he would have a lot of Latinos that worked for him, his bodyguards and the deputies and things, and I never understood that.
Well, one of the first things that, I'll tell you some horror stories about Paul and the Latino community, okay?
I'm ready.
We had two deputy chiefs, Hispanic. He demoted them right away when he took over as sheriff.
Did he give a reason for doing that?
No. We had a sergeant, deputy sheriff sergeant, that passed away from COVID-19 about 6 weeks ago. I talked to his fiance just last week. She called me. She reached out to me. Paul has his right to industrial injury and on-duty death.
Wow.
He was a member of the human smuggling unit, and a lot of the Hispanic deputies, most of them were Hispanic deputies, they feel that he has discriminated against them throughout the last 3.5 years.
Oh my goodness.
You know, he likes to profess that he's, you know, this big Latino guy, but in reality, he's treated the Hispanics that work for him very poorly.
And we're going to have to wrap it up. We got like 30 seconds. Give us your website, Jerry.
My website is www.sheridan4sheriff2020.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on. I'm Alice Lara.
Don Jose.
Jerry Sheridan from Maricopa County Sheriff. We'll be back again next week, Tuesday at 4. Thank you, Jim Bunner, for hanging in there, and thank you, Steve Palmer. You guys have a great week, and guac on.